Hello, welcome to episode 3. This is Peter Thompson here, and I've been chatting to Mike over the last 6 months, and this is the part of his life where he arrives in America from Singapore and starts, well, I suppose he starts in earnest his theatrical career. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So, Mike, you we've got, we you've played cards on a Singapore boat with somebody who cheats, who prays,
Irish priest.
an Irish priest, and you finally got onto land, as it were, and you've got your relatives there. And just sort of tell us, what happens? What happens next?
Well, I suppose the nice thing for me was that uh, CinemaScope had started, and also vinyl LPs had started. So I went out and bought lots of show tunes and albums, and it was the beginning of a huge collection. And and I started to go and see films, and I saw in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard, and one of those big things, I saw James Dean in his first film, East of Eden.
What year is this?
This is 1954.
Right.
And I remember being overwhelmed by him. It seemed like the last word in naturalism. And the widescreen, it was all one. And now, over the years, I've seen this film a couple of times, and it gets more and more mannered as I see it. Mm. So that's also told me something very interesting, that our idea of what is naturalistic acting is very much a style, and it's very much dependent upon the period, the levels of naturalism. Because Dean was the epitome of the method actor who is so real. I can't quite get the words out, and that's the world of twitching, twitchy acting, and and I'm inaudible, and then I get and that was very influential, and it was being in Hollywood, and I thought, I want to stay here. Now, parallel with this and preceding it, my mother, when I went away, had sold the little cottage in Bungalow in Cookham and moved back to London because she felt very marooned this time on her own, living, and all her friends who had come down during the war had gone back to London. So she had a flat in London, which I never saw, of course. And her business was not doing so well because after the war, women stopped wearing hats as frequently as they had before, because before the war it was de rigueur. You always put something on your head when you went out. And also she was a woman on her own, and she found that all her friends, married friends, would never invite her to meet single men, or even their husbands. And by a series of circumstances, she'd had previously a great friend of hers who'd gone to Los Angeles and got married. Now, she'd been very nice to this friend at a tricky time in her life, and this woman in California, Los Angeles, had said to my mother, "You must come out and stay with us." So she had been, while I was in the Air Force, she'd been to Singapore, she'd been to Los Angeles and spent a month there, and said, "I love it. The sun's out. I get invited out. I meet other men. It's, people are much more gregarious and much more open. And, I wouldn't mind living there." So to cut a very long story short, I got to Los Angeles and I thought, well, if my mother likes it, why don't I stay here? I want to work in the movies. This is where the movies are. So I said to her, okay, I think I'd like to stay here. So she said, great. She packed up. Okay. Now, of course, I didn't think about how it would affect my dad. And I discovered, obviously, he felt terrible because he hadn't seen me in 2 years.
Mm.
And he wasn't going to see me immediately. But, you know, you always think that your parents are an adjunct to your life. They're sort of peripheral support system, supporting cast for you, aren't they? You know, they're not the stars in their own movie. And so what I did, my mother got on a boat, on one of those big, you know, the Queen Elizabeth, whatever it is, and she came from New York, and after a month in Los Angeles, staying with these very nice relatives, I took a Greyhound bus trip around the States, ending up in New York where I would meet her. And I went to Grand Canyon, and I rode down to the river on donkeys, which was terrifying. And I went through a flood in Texas, a town called Amarillo, where all the buses were stopped and all these cowboys were sort of leaning on counters, you know, the bus depot. And I thought, I'm in a movie. And then I sat next to somebody on a bus who told me terrible things about corrupt mayors in Texas who'd had people throw you know, stolen tires onto other people's property so they'd be prosecuted and things. And I listened. And I went to New Orleans, where the hotel I was meant to stay at was overbooked and they'd had no record of me. And I ended up in a Tennessee Williams flea pit. There was something I think called larkspur lotion, which was an anti sort of knits. What are the insects you get on your, you know?
Flea.
What?
Flea.
No, in your pubic hair.
Oh, crabs.
Crabs, you know. And there was a bottle sitting on a shelf in this thing, and it was very unpleasant. I remember the cab driver. I said, "Found me a hotel," and he said, "Do you you're interested in men or women?" And I said, I got English. And anyway, I ended up in this flea pit. But I walked around Los Angeles, New Orleans, and it was all very glamorous and exciting. And then I went to stay with the son of my cousins, who was doing his national service in the Navy in Pensacola in Florida. And I stayed with them for a few days. And then I rode all the way up the East Coast, Raleigh and so forth, stayed in Washington, and there was a big hurricane on the way, which was all very exciting. And now, this is important, in Washington, I went to the Arena Theatre, which was a very different place from what it is now. And I saw the original version of Arthur Miller's Crucible.
Wow.
It had the scene with the girls in the wood and all that, which, you know, and I was thrilled by the idea of theatre in the round. Absolutely knocked me out. Being close to the actors was stunning. Mm. I sat with goosebumps, and my hair standing on it for the whole performance. It was so, I didn't understand the play, you know, the end of it particularly, but I was thrilled by the rawness and the liveness of the actors. Okay. Got to New York, stayed at a YHCA, you know, YMHA, Young Men's Hebrew. You know, God, I wish I could remember all these acronyms things. I stayed there for a month, waiting for my mother. Went to lots of films. Went to everything that was on Broadway. Tea and Sympathy with Deborah Carr, directed by, you know, Elia Kazan. You know, or the original Boyfriend with Julie Andrews, and a transfer from London. Just wonderful, you know, and just so exciting being on Broadway, going to you know, ecstasy. And then my mother arrived. We stayed in New York for a while. I don't know why we stayed there for a while, but she felt I had to have a job because she had very limited funds. You could only take so much money out of England at that time, I think. And she also wasn't that well off. She'd sold her business, but she didn't have a lot of money. And she liked to stay in nice hotels. So we were staying in a nice hotel. But so I got a Christmas job at Saks Fifth Avenue in the shoe department, fetching shoes and things for people for about a week. And I used to go with this mass of workers, you know, down Fifth Avenue, you know, feeling, oh, I'm part of the crowd. It's like a movie, again, going to work with the masses. And then finally, we got on a flight, we went to Los Angeles, and you know, through various stages settled. We sort of rented an apartment, and then she started off in Beverly Hills, and it was too expensive, so we moved to Westwood, which was where the LA, Los Angeles, oh God, the LA University of Los Angeles was. UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, yeah? And so there was a little, you know, student community with very nice stops and bookshops, and it was all lovely, and wonderful record shops. And I read books and read more lyrics and bought more records, and I couldn't get work for ages. I used to go around to shops, you know, just for Christmas saying, I'm looking for work, and nobody ever gave me any work, and I felt terrible. And then through a friend, I started working in downtown Los Angeles in a foam rubber factory. I used to get on a bus, which nobody got, you know, and travel downtown and come home with bits of foam rubber in my hair. And I think the guy, it was sort of implied that he would train me up to sort of support him in this foam rubber factory. And all the staff were basically Latino, and they were lovely. They were very welcoming to me and nice. And they showed me how to cut foam rubber, and it was so dangerous. And there was a very nice Latino young couple, an old jalopy. He used to drive me up to the bus stop. And, you know, so I did that. At the same time, I was somehow trying to get into movie studios. And I finally, I don't know quite now, I don't know, it must have been a contact. So anyway, I saw somebody, and I got a job as a sort of gopher in the Tom and Jerry cartoon department, which was not on the main lot, where they made the Tom and Jerry's. And they were a very friendly crew. And there was one of the women working there used to take me out in lunch hours in her little two-seater and sort of try to make out with me. And I had a bike, and I didn't ride American bikes. The brakes are in the pedals. You have to pedal backwards. And my job was basically running with mail between the Tom and Jerry cartoon department and the main, you know, lot. And I'd walk around and I'd meet young guys in the editing department and start talking to them. And after 2 weeks in the Tom and Jerry department, I got a promotion. I got moved up to the publicity department as an apprentice trainee publicist. And I thought, I'm on my way. And it was fantastic because my jobs were taking VIPs on tours personally around the studio, taking them on the sets to watch filming, getting them to meet stars and have photographs taken, taking them to the commissary for lunch and saying, that's Lena Turner, that's Kirk Douglas, that's Marilyn Monroe, that's James Dean, that's Paul Newman. And also taking them around the lot and showing them all the costumes that have been stored forever. So you had Garbo's costumes from this and Katharine Hepburn's costumes from that. And then the prop department where there was every prop that you could, it was, you know, like 4 floors, beautifully organized with pens and feathers and doctor's bag, medicine. I mean, everything you could want in furniture. I mean, amazingly organized. And I was there for about 18 months. And I used to also have to go for ice cream for the 2 women who were, the man who ran the publicity department was very famous at his time. His name was Howard Strickling, and he was a great friend of Clark Gable's. And he had a turkey ranch in Encino, which was one of the districts outside, you know, main Los Angeles. And at Christmas time, I had to take my car and drive down to his ranch and collect a whole lot of turkeys and deliver them to Robert Taylor and whoever, you know, in Beverly Hills and Bel Air. So that was, and I also went to first nights and had to, you know, sort of be around just to organize. I was still very shy and very correct, and I didn't know how to promote myself or push myself, but I wanted to go further. And I tried to get into the production office, and I didn't make it. And I was, but I was sort of enjoying life. I got my pay, and I was going to the movies and having sex, and thinking about theatre, and it was all very glamorous. And then one day, Howard Strictly called me into his office and said, "Look, I think you should leave. You're not going anywhere with this. I think you should take a break." And it was the best thing he could have done, but it was shattering. Terrible. Now, parallel to this period, I started to, through a friend of my mother's, I joined a local semi-amateur theatre company. Well, it was amateur, but LA was full of wannabes, actors, every other person. At every gas station, any guy that filled up your car wanted to be an actor. Every waitress was an actress, and so forth. And I started working for them, with them. I stage managed one show, and then they let me do a one-act play by Tennessee Williams called Hello from Bertha, which was about a prostitute dying in a brothel in New Orleans. So you can imagine, coming from Cookham, Berkshire. But I worked well with the actors, and it was entered for some big, festival of amateur directings, and I got the Jesse Lasky Best Award for direction. And I had this thing sitting on my mantelpiece. Mm. And I thought, oh, there we go. That's it. Yeah. And then I did another, and then I got very ambitious to do my whole evening. And instead of doing a play, I decided to do 3 totally different plays in different styles. The first one was based on, or an excerpt from a book by Kenneth Tynan about bullfighting called The Death of Manolete. And I broke it up and did it as a dramatized reading. The second was a cocktail one-act play called La Voix Humaine, the human voice. It was for a woman on a phone trying to keep hold of a lover who'd left her. And I worked with a Swedish actress who was obviously very ambitious to do this. And I never heard of her again. She looked a bit like young Ingmar Bergman. I think I've got a program so I could look up her name somewhere. And then for the third show, I decided to convert the space. It wasn't a proper theatre space, into a theatre in the round, and did a Molnar comedy called 1, 2, 3, about a very important guy who wants to get his daughter married very quickly. And I can't remember, and it's got lots of characters running. It's a farce. And I did that. So I rehearsed those 3 plays, and it was a very long evening. And I did I translated the cocktail play myself. I did the adaptation of The Death of Manolete myself, and moved the furniture in the intervals. So it was a hugely long thing. Now, my mother had remarried, and very nice. He was sort of retired. He'd been a property developer guy, and they lived up on a hill in where was it? Not Bel Air, but oh God, I'll remember. It doesn't matter. And he was very nice. I got on with him very well. He used to tease my mother and tell her to shut up when she gave her her opinion about things she didn't know. And I sort of sided with him. He liked me, and he saw the show. He said, "It's very long, but if you want to go train, I'll see you through college." So wonderful man. He said, "Find out where you want to go." And so, bless his heart, I thought, well, I want to go to New York. So in 1957, which was the beginning of my Annus Mirabilis, I went to New York, saw more theatre, lived in a slightly seedy hotel on the West Side, very near Madison Square, where Madison Square Garden used to be, and where they used to have circuses. and the Texas Giant and the fat lady used to come and sit in the foyer of my hotel, and the sofa used to sag. And I enrolled in something called the American Theatre Wing, where they did extracurricular classes in theatre, and I took one on acting and one on play analysis. One on directing, one on play analysis, and they were great. And we had to bring play scenes in and get them analysed and critiqued. And that's where I discovered about playing objectives. Because the directing class was run by a guy called Joseph Cram, who was a playwright who'd had a great success on Broadway with a play called The Shrike. And two things I learned from him. Every time we'd show our scenes, he'd then say to the actors, what do you want in the scene? What's your objective? What's your intention? Okay, now do it again. And the actors responded in such a way that what had been cloudy, vague, became clear. It was like every time they redid the scene, it was like a veil had been removed. And a big bell, one of those bells that Anna rings, chimed. That's a theatrical truth. The actors have to be in a state, for it to work. And also he talked about what plays are really about. And I suddenly realized I was totally innocent of that. I was totally ignorant about themes and motives, of metaphors. All I knew was plot and characters and whether I believed them. It's interesting, isn't it? But so I learned a lot from that. And then I was deciding, where am I going to go to train properly, go to a proper, university department. And Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh had this very high reputation for actors, directors, everything. And I applied, passed an exam, a test, and got in. So I spent from January to June or to late May in New York, having a wonderful time, going to the theatre, knowing I was going to go to a proper school for 3 or 4 years and train. And in the summer, I went back to England for the first time in 5 years, spent it with my father and his new, well, not so new, his wife, his second wife, who he'd married when I was in Singapore. Went to a lot of theatre there. Really was nice to see them again. Came back on. I went across the Atlantic to England on a German one class boat, and came back third class on the Queen Mary, I think, and stayed in New York for a few days. Got on a train, went to Pittsburgh, and spent 3 years to get my bachelor's degree in fine arts. It's a 4-year course, but because of my English training and education level, they let me cram everything into 3 years. So I was doing 4 years work in 3 years. And the training there was fantastic. I mean, maybe this should be a thing in itself about the school, because the education there was, I look back there's never been anything like it in this country.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that chat. And if you did, would you press the like button and also the subscribe button? That would be great. And if you wanted to be given alerts to when the next one is happening, just press the bell button. If you want to put any comments or any questions underneath here, underneath the video, please do, and at some point I will re-interview Mike, as it were, and put some of these questions to him. So I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.